So here I have what I've done so far. Now that I've shared everything, I'm going to delete all this. So what I have is I have an ARM Markdown document. It's which I created just by selecting an ARM Markdown with the presentation with HTML slides. I then edited the YAML top to use Shiny as a runtime. Loaded all my libraries, grabbed some data. I grabbed SA4 and SA3 for maps. I don't think I'm going to use both, and made some summaries. I also have a list of slides that I'm making, hopefully right below me on this stream, starting off with the title slide, ggplot, do some data wrangling, etc. The data wrangling is here, but I want to go over that in a little bit more detail. I don't want to share this. Hopefully my audio is working. I was having some problems earlier. Please ping me in chat if there's a problem. I want to pop chat out, minimize this, put this over here. All right. So here I have my cold. Ooh, I want to keep this on top. How can I do this? Can I make this always on top? Huh. That's annoying. What does that look like? That's annoying. That's how that looks. Right. So let's make a title slide. Data viz. Doing data viz with our. I'm pretty sure it will do that automatically if I save this and run the presentation. It should produce an HTML with very little in it. It should just say doing data viz with R and nothing else. I think until I need the Shiny, I might take that out. So here it is, doing data viz with R by me. The presentation will be the 28th of May, so that's there. Here I have my very messy command window. How about I clear that? And what I want to start with is a slide that says overview. I think. Outline. Yep, bullets or dashes. Demonstrate different data visualization techniques in R. Including I want to use ggplot. And enhancements. Let's put some code. Let's put something fun on the code. What's a code? Code. What do I call it? I think there's something syntax highlighting. Here we go. Let's use espresso because I like coffee. Let's get a logo. Let's put up my company logo because why not? Documents, Doc Savage Solutions, white background. Okay. Open. Okay. And so now I have a slightly better title slide. Not much better, but slightly better. And after using ggplot, I want to have interactive plots. I will put that here. I'll be using ggplotly, leaflet, highcharts, highcharter, charter, and then I want to look at interactive data. I'm going to emphasize data with Shiny, and here I want to put reporting and documentation with R Markdown, including these slides. Interactive data with Shiny, and let's focus on data wrangling with dplyr. What else do we want to talk about? I don't think I really want to talk about much else here. Maybe I do. Maybe I don't. What else is in my handy dandy list of things? Raw code. And I want to say that code is available for download. Preparation process was recorded. If you want to see how the sausage is made. And I'm going to say that my problem statement, or what I want to visualize, impact of COVID on Australian jobs and wages, which I have data from the ABS, which is the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and geographic data from the ASGS. What is the ASGS? Is it the Australian Statistical ASGS? Australian Statistical Geography Standard. Okay. And let's see if anything's done that. Nope. And let's see if anything's happening here. Nope. Maybe I'll post this on LinkedIn. Maybe I won't. I think I won't. I think I want to see if anyone joins this from Meetup before I go advertising it further. Someone came and left. Huh. I peeked at 2 people. Yes. Okay. So what do I have now? I have my R. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm going to remove runtime Shiny for now, because it should speed this up. And I can knit this to make sure it works. Yep. full screen, and I can hit W to make it widescreen, and it's too big. Okay, close that. And then I want a slide called data. And I've got data from the ABS. What's the name of this guy? Weekly payroll, jobs and wages in Australia. Dated the 27th of March, 2021. And I think I want to have a screenshot of what the data looks like, so I'll make one of those now. Well, that's SA3, but that's alright. I can do it again for SA4. Do I want to do SA3 or SA4? How much granularity do I want in the data here? Huh. Let's use SA4 will be faster. I think I'll do SA4. Print screen. Up here to ABS. Grab that. Grab that. File save as. Put it in my documents, rviz, data snapshot. .jpg. So now I have a picture of my data, which I will include here. Snapshot of ABS data used for this presentation. And the name of that is whatever I saved it as. Data snapshot. And if I'm lucky, it will find that and put it there. Go. All right, from that, what's next? Wrangling and tidy data. Good. In data wrangling, we have this concept of tidy data. Every column is a variable. Every row is a record, and every cell is a value. And it's generally the same as long format. So in particular, my data is not tidy. Downloaded data is not tidy. Should have a column named date with current column labels as values. Now the good news is this is fairly straightforward to do in the tidyverse. Yeah, I'm going to get rid of SA3, I think. Did I get rid of SA3 or SA4? That's SA4. I'll use SA4. I'll get rid of SA3. Bye, SA3. Bye-bye. You're too big anyway. Bye. Which means I don't need SA3 here, which is good. It's really weird talking to myself as I program, in case you're curious. And so I've got the data downloaded. It's not tidy, but I can convert with tidyverse verbs to put the data in long format with pivot longer and separate number name pairs into separate columns. So what I mean by that is if I look at my data that's come in, if I just do this part and look at jobs SA4, I have the problem that, well, first of all, the names aren't very nice, and in particular the dates here have come in as numbers. State or territory having spaces isn't the best name for use within R. And then it's 1 New South Wales instead of New South Wales. It's 101 capital region, not capital region. If I look at the SA4 data itself, for 2016 at data, so it's got a code and a name split up. The same thing with code and a name for the state. And so the data as it comes in straight from Excel has those two merged together. So pivot longer, what I'm going to do with pivot longer, if I move through this a little bit, so now with pivot longer I've taken the date and instead of having all those column names, I've made it a long table instead of a wide table, so that now all of those former column names are now entries in the, are now rows for date, and the value that was in that cell is now an index. So that's part of it. Now I need to get this date from being a character to being a date field. And that's what's done in the next part, where I'm turning that first to a number, that's that as numeric of date, and then looper date to turn it into a date. For whatever reason, day 1 of Excel is December 30th, 1899, because reasons. That's not a good thing to press. So now, jobs SA4 has fixed the date. And then, because my reference data, my map data, has state as an index and a name, I want to split that out. And that's what I'm doing with these two separate statements. The first one takes state, and it goes through and it sees the name, or the number, sorry, and the punctuation and the space, and it says, well, that's clearly two different things. So now if I look at, it's split it into these two things. And the names are a little obscure, perhaps. This STE underscore code and STE underscore name. That's just the code in the name. That's in my data from my leaflet, so that I can join together the index for any particular date, the job index, to my geographical data so that I can make a map. So that's what I'm doing here, and then it's the same thing as that separate statement with the SA4 name, because it's also numbered. So now I'm going to, again using dplyr, take jobs SA4, then group by the state name and the date, and then take the mean of the index to give me an idea for what the average for each state. It's an idea because it should be weighted. If you look at the states, having everything being the same index, whether it's the poorest rural region or the poorest region of the city to the richest region of the city, is a bit odd, but here we are. And then I do the same thing Australia-wide, grouping by a new state name, which I've called Australia, and the date, and taking the mean of the mean index, and dropping the groups. And then combining those two together with bind rows so that I have state name and mean index for each date. So that's what I'm doing there, and the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to be using that for my ggplot. So I have these two different items here. I have my normal data frames, which I'm using for ggplots, and then I have my SA4 information, which I'm going to use with Leaflet to build that into a map. So let's go through that. So the idea is with tidyverse and pivot longer and separate, which I've just explained. So now I want to give an example, first example of ggplot. And the idea behind ggplot is build plots with a series of layers. And what I'm going to do there is put in some R to have so what I'm doing here in our Markdown is I'm creating a code chunk with the R engine, and it's going to be labeled ggplot example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a first plot is ggplot, and the data here I'm going to use the job summary plus I'm going to make a line. And the idea behind ggplot is you have these aesthetics, as they're called. And so along the x-axis, I want to have the date. And along the y-axis, I'm going to have the mean index. These names are coming directly from my names of the data frame, job summary. And I'm going to change the color by state name. ggplot was written by Kiwi, so both kind of British spellings, color with the U, and American spellings, color without the U, will work with ggplot. That's not true with all of the other packages, so it's something to keep in mind. And it's a little funny for me to swap back and forth between Australian and American spellings, but such is life. And so what this is going to do is ggplot creates the plot using this data of job summary. And then geomLine says, okay, I want to put a line on top of this with date and mean index, and I want every distinct state name to be its own color. And then I can add on things to that. I can put a label, X is date, Y is wage index, which is a better name than mean index, and a title of history of wage index by state or territory. So if I run that, nothing's going to happen exactly, but it creates this thing called first plot, and then I can run first plot. And now, with any luck, the plot will show up there. And if it doesn't show up there, it should show up here in my, because my window is hiding. That's why it's not showing up in my window. In my plot window, there it is. It will resize itself in a second. There we go. So yeah, the X label of date, the Y label of wage index, and then it gives me the history by state and territory, where again, every state is its own color, including the state of Australia. There's another way to do this, and by that what I mean is I can create the same plot, but rather than using job summary, I want to use job state. Job state. Everything else is the same. All the names I made the same on purpose. But now, rather than having this geom line with that, I can make another line using a different data source, in this case JobsAus, and I want to have the same aesthetics, X equals date, Y equals mean index. But now I want the color to be just Australia, and I'm going to force the color to be black. And the line type to be dashed, and I want it to be a little bit bigger. So now I have my state data showing the same plot as before, but now I should have an Australia color coming from a different data set, but with the same general aesthetics. And now if I run that, I don't actually know if having an aesthetic and a color will work, but we will see. So as I feared, it didn't put Australia in the legend, but did put it on here, which is fine. How is that looking? Did I overdo that? Not really. Can I make this smaller? Is that too small for people to see? If there's anyone in chat, could you let me know if you can see that? Please? Can you see the graph? Right, so that's not what I want R. So this is how I'm making the plot. So you can add them on. Getting things into the legend could be a bit tricky, but you can add them on manually like that. And so now I've got a nice plot. I'm actually going to move the legend to the bottom. And now because this is our markdown, if I knit this, rather than this showing up, the plot showing up in my window here, I can ignore that, which is good. So this is my slide. It's good to know that the that image didn't come through right, but I can fix that. So now my slides look like that. And the nice thing about R Markdown is that when I execute this R code, it shows up in my slide like this. So that if there's ever a question of, well, how did I get this graph? Where did it come from? It came from here. And this may seem simple, but it's really quite nice in professional context, because when you report to management and you get some numbers and the numbers aren't necessarily what people were expecting, it's good to have some form of assurance that what you got was right, and you can trace things back. So that's how I made that first plot. Simple ggplot. What's next on my list? Next I want to use ggplotly. So this is quite simple. If I look at my document again, can you see this? Okay, I don't know if you can see that document though. What if I try to window capture that? Right, so here's that, which you can hopefully see. And it's the slide of my plot, and I can go up and down through my slides. And the ggplot is an image, basically. This is just a fixed graph. So it doesn't have anything in terms of clicking on it, in terms of mouse over information. I can't zoom, right? It doesn't let me do anything. And while that's not very sophisticated, if you're printing things, if your boss insists on things being in PDF, PowerPoint, what have you, then it's there and ready to go. Let's demote that down so it's out of the way. But now what I can do for another slide second example of ggplotly. The ggplotly function in the plotly library will fortify the graph and make it interactive. So this is going to be a very quick R chunk. Our ggplotly example. No. And I'm going to call ggplotly of first plot. And so now if I knit that document and promote this back up. No, promote. So now I do have some information on top of it. It's added in tooltip information. It's got all these nice things from the Plotly basic interface. It moved my state name, which I'm not entirely happy with, but it did add interactivity in terms if I don't want to see Victoria, I can click on it and it disappears. I can double click on Victoria and everything other than Victoria disappears, and so forth. I can zoom. It's a very quick way if you don't need to make things printable in PowerPoint, in Word, etc., to quickly make interactive plots from your ggplots. So that's how that works. If I look back at my R slides, which are hopefully still on the screen here, down there. So what I've done is my title, my outline and data, my wrangling and tidy data, my ggplot example, my ggplot with interactivity for the ggplotly example. So now I want to do ggplot with Shiny and R Markdown. That's going to take me a little while. I think I'll save that for a bit. Let's promote this down, go away. So I'm going to skip that. Third example. Shiny interactions. And I might do a fourth example. R Markdown publishing. But what I'm basically going to do there is with Shiny, even though ggplot is an image, you can still interact with it. Because it's an image, there's a means by which you can set up an image map, basically, so that you can interact with it through Shiny, just like you could any other image map. And so because there's an image map there, you can do things like click on different plots, you can select with a brush, you can double click, right click, etc. And so with that, you can make ggplot reactive in a way. But what I want to do with it is to have your time series, and if you want to forecast, to make it brushable, to say which data should you use in order to run your forecast time series to project how we're going to continue recovering from the impacts of lockdown, etc. Because which time series I want to use here isn't exactly clear. It certainly seems like there's some periodicity around New Year's where you get this big drop in wages for Christmas. The drop for after COVID was greater than the drop for Christmas on an Australia level, so there's that. But if we want to project out for a few months, I don't necessarily need to worry about Christmas, the Christmas seasonality, that drop that I'm expecting again. But I can do less. I can make short projections without worrying about that seasonality, or I can force the seasonality in. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do with it, but I wanted to stress that you can use Shiny to rebuild models. It's not just a dashboard pre-selecting current data. You can use Shiny to do calculations to make new data, which is one of the big things about Shiny, which I use in my job quite often. But oftentimes if you're just reading about Shiny, it looks like it's a BI tool, but actually it's much more. You can coordinate all your statistical inputs and outputs to a browser, rather than just select individual things. And then for the R Markdown example, I want to take all of that, whatever decisions we come to in Shiny, and export everything to PowerPoint. So with PowerPoint then, I'll be using ggplot without the enhancements, because PowerPoint doesn't really let you use HTML that well, and moving along. But I'm going to do those later. And so, where am I now? So title is done. I'm going to do something very satisfying and hit the strike through button a few times, which just feels good to say, okay, this is done now. And what am I doing? Then I'm going to build some maps. Maps are quite easy with Leaflet, so long as you have the shape data. Getting the shape data is a little tricky. It's pretty big, shape data, but I'm going to use the ASGS package here, which you get not by just install packages ASGS, but there's a foyer that you use, and then it goes out and you can install it that way. It's pretty big. It's about 800 meg from memory that I downloaded, which is a bit excessive since I'm only really using SA4. The other option is you can get shapefiles from the ABS, from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, read the files, and use those for your leaflet rather than the ASGS package. It's faster for me to use the package, and I'm still not convinced that I won't go into something more granular than SA4, but here we are. So I have that. Let's fix this while I'm thinking about it. Why did that not work? Let's see what went wrong with my including the image. R Markdown image. Yep, that should work. Maybe if I put that it's in the current directory. No. Why are you not working? Why are you grumpy? Are you in a different folder? Data snapshot.jpg. Data snapshot. Are you not a JPEG? Is that the problem? No? Do you need quotes? I don't think you need quotes. Do you need quotes? I don't know what's going on. I think that should work, but clearly it doesn't. I will have to find a I'll have to find another case where I've used images before, because I don't know why that's not working. Anyway, maps. So that was the end of my basic introduction to plots. So now I want to look at maps, and I'm going to use Leaflet. So leaflet is a JavaScript package that is leaflet.js, which has an API to R. And what I want to do is look at using leaflet that way. Hey, hey Raj, yo. Just to check, you can hear me, right? Please say yes. I've fought with this for a while to try to get it to work. Where was I? So leaflet is a package, a JavaScript package, but I'm going to use the API to talk to it with R. I have shapefiles as I went through, and I've stored them off, and I'm going to grab a, let's start making a map. So if I just run leaflet with my SA4 data, not much is going to happen. But if I then pipe that into add tiles, now I'm going to get a nice map of the world. And I can zoom in to our favorite place, Australia. And as I zoom into Australia, we start to get some information about major cities, states, etc. And so now for the magic, I'm going to add polygons, which breaks, which is interesting. Didn't I add that in? Oh, not plus, pipe. This is what I was saying earlier. ggplot uses plus. Everything else uses pipe, just to confuse you, or confuse me, as the case may be. So now it's going to take a while to render that, as it draws all the little polygons as set out by the ABS to use the to make all the little lines. It's still running. It's happy little lines. There we go. And now I have this map of Australia with all of the SA4 units, if you will. And I'm going to put that in a series of slides. So step 1, and 2, create the map. I'm actually going to reverse the order there. So the call to leaflet initializes the map, and then the add polygons with add polygons. Now this is going to be a little odd because I'm going to make the map without adding the tiles to have Australia underneath, which is going to be a bit funny. And here we have leaflet of SA4 2016, piped add polygons. I'm going to improve this a little bit by having color of white. Again, it's a little annoying that color here has to be spelled the American way, not the British, Australian, or Kiwi way. And I'm going to make the lines smaller. I'm going to have some options. What's the name of my option I want? The name of the option I want is background. Not background. Bring to front. Highlight options. I'm actually going to make this black. And then I'm going to have options called bring to, no, highlight options. Highlight options equals highlight options. of a color, which this is going to be white. I'm going to make the weight bigger and bring to front equals true. So now once again, if I knit this document and promote my window capture 3 up, it's going to take a while to make, but then it'll give me that map of Australia, but without the tiles underneath, just the shapes. So I'll have a nice picture of Australia, but without any of the information below it. Hopefully. So it's knitting it up now. It's again good if you're using HTML, but if you're not using HTML, well, it gets a little harder to have everything. Like the mouse over information, which I'll be adding, the tile information for some of the landmarks and things in Australia, like the major cities, that I can get from zooming in on my leaflet diagram. I think using OpenStreetMaps, which is the default, I can go all the way into streets of Melbourne, which is kind of cool. Come on. Come on, computer. Yes, I know you're rendering 2 windows at once. You can do it. You're a big boy. So as I said, here's my quick map of Australia. Hopefully you can see that. Doesn't look like you actually can. I'll add it back in again. There it is. So now I have a slide with this map of Australia. It's not very interesting though. I can mouse over and get it to change color, which is what I was doing with the highlight options, so that whenever I mouse over one of these guys, I get it to come forth. I can zoom in. I can interact with this, but it doesn't really tell me anything that I want to know so far. So that's, and yeah, as I said, I can do that here with the tiles. It uses quite a bit more. Let's zoom in on Adelaide. Adelaide doesn't get enough attention. Let's give it some love. So as I said, you can start to see individual streets based on what's in and out of different SA4 areas. So if you wanted to find your house, if you happen to be from Adelaide, first of all, I'm sorry. But secondly, you can go through and look at all that. So that's what I'm doing in this slide. I'm going to make another one for step 3. Add tiles, which I'm going to take this and paste it. And pipe it. Pipe it this time, not add it, because I'm not using ggplot anymore. Let's tidy all this up while I'm thinking of it, so that I don't look at it later and think, boy, that's some untidy code, which I never do with my own code. Why would I? So now I've got this other thing. Let's look and see what kind of tiles I can have. I think there's quite a few. Does anyone have a favorite leaflet tile provider? Where's add tiles? Tiles, yep. So there's a template. There's tile options. Maybe that'll have some nice tiles. Oh, it's got zoom information. We'll just leave it. And so now when I, again, knit the document, will again take a while. Oops. It takes especially a long time if you have a bug in your code. What's wrong with you? There's two things named leaflet 1, which it's right to complain about. So now when I run it again, it's going to take me a little bit longer because not only is it going to draw Australia, but it's also going to draw Australia with the tiles underneath it, so that grabbing all the streets and everything else is going to take a bit longer. So that means I get to pour myself some tea. And if it's still going, I even get to drink some tea. And I've made videos and stuff before, but I've never done live coding. So hopefully this is working. It is good to see Raj come and say hello. But yeah, hi. So now looking at my slides, that should update. Go update slides. Go. There it goes. It's exciting stuff coding. It's exciting stuff building maps of Australia. Yeah, I'm also suddenly very happy that I stopped at SA4 rather than going down to SA3, which is more granular. So if it's taking me this long to build SA4, I'm happy to stop at SA3. No, sorry. If it takes this long to build SA4, I'm grateful that I don't have to wait for it to draw SA3. So there we go. Adding the tiles, waiting for it to render. Go. Drinking tea, most importantly. So now I have this with the tiles. I can once again start zooming in on Australia. I'm going to pick on Sydney this time because, like any good Melburnian, I feel the need to poke fun at Sydney. And we can go and zoom in to the greater definition of the areas of Sydney. When I mouse over these things, it still doesn't exactly tell me anything useful in terms of the name of the area or whatever, but you can see as I zoom in, SA4 areas normally have about 100 to 300,000 people, and so as I get into Sydney, you can see the regions get smaller and smaller. Whereas if I zoom back out and go over to Western Australia, you get some pretty massive areas out here in the outback for my map here. Right, like this lower half of Western Australia I think is, you know, quite a bit bigger than all of these areas around Sydney and Melbourne, probably combined. So that's how I get my basic map information. I'm going to add some extra things to those polygons to make it a little bit more useful. I'm going to add in a label equals, as a function, I'm going to paste st, what is it? Not state, SA4 name 16. So all I've done there is I've said get the name SA4 name 16, and so that when I mouse over, rather than it just turning white, it'll show me the name of the region, which is useful, and I didn't feel like making it another slide. So now what I want to do is I'm going to augment with data, jobs data. So I said it toward the beginning that in the wrangling data process, what I wanted to do with with the data from the ABS, then I wanted to be able to match it up really well with the geographic data I have. So now I have the data from the ABS with an SA4 name, and I have the data, my map data by SA4 name, and so I'm going to join the two together. All right, this bothers me. Step 3 should have, this is steps 1 and 2. There we go, fixed. Leaflet 4. And I'm going to take my SA4 data, and I'm going to make that, I'm going to create a copy so I don't overwrite my local data. And then if I look at SA4 data, it has a data component. And I'm going to set that to the join of SA4 data. And my wage data, which I've called jobs SA4. And I'm going to take jobs SA4 and I'm going to limit this down because I don't want my map data, my SA4 data at data, to be overwritten with the state name or anything else from my jobs SA4. In fact, something else I want to do is on jobs SA4 data, I only want to pull out a specific date. So I'm going to filter to where date is YMD of, I want a fun date, let's do 2020 April 18th. I think April 18th is one of my data. April 18th it is. And as I said, I only want a few columns. I just want the SA4 name 2016 to join. I just want the date and the mean index, or just index. So now I'll be joining together my map data, the SA4 data at data, and the jobs data, which I've read in by SA4. And I want to do that by SA4 name 2016. Is it 2016 or 16? I think it's just 16. It will complain if I get it wrong. What don't you like? There you go. So executing that, could not find function YMD. That's easy enough to fix. That's in the Lubert 8 package. Library, yes, library. Lubert 8. And now if I run this, so now if I look at my SA4 data, at data, now the index has been appended on along with the date that I'm using, which I've chosen to be 2020. So now I can go through the same leaflet as before. However, now I'm going to take the label and I'm going to put in a paste colon format. I'll just leave in the index, round it. And I'm going to make a color as a function of a color quantile. I want to use which palette do I want to use? I'll use Viridis. I'll use red, yellow, green. Domain equals index, n equals 6. So now I've put in a fill color on that palette. which will hopefully, because it's red, yellow, green, low numbers will be in red, high numbers will be in green. So I'm quickly going to run this to make sure it works before I wait to have it knit the document to do all of them. And it says index isn't found, which is interesting because I'm referencing the wrong data. The wrong variable, I should say, because I was using the original one, the one that didn't have index appended to the end, thereby, completely removing all the work I did to get index added to the end in the first place. The proper thing to do when you realize you've made a mistake like that is, of course, drink tea. And so now in my viewer, which you can hopefully see, it has completely not recognized the color palette I've used, which is nice. So let's try turning on the color brewer and running it again. But the good news is, as I mouse over them now, I'm getting the name of the SA4 region and the index to 4 digits. All of these are only reported at 2 digits. There's no reason to round to 4 digits. I'll round it. Okay, why are you not working? So the good news is, I looked at doing this earlier and had it working. So why is my color quantile try using Viridis. Oh, because I need to pass in which color to use. Once again, the only logical thing to do when you make such a mistake is to drink tea. But this is a pattern that I'll often do, is I'll make something work, go away, forget exactly what I did, but then I have it in my history, or I have it in another file, another presentation, and go back to that presentation and see what I did at the time, and go from there. So now I have a slightly better, slightly more colorful picture of Australia, where the color is hopefully the green ones are higher, and the red ones are lower. Now it's gone based off the values available, and it's only a few different colors. So the range here isn't all that great, going from I think 89 to 94 seems to be the highest. I can look in Excel. At the 18th of April, there's an 89.8, 89.3. Of course, it tells me the count and the sum and the average, but not the max and the min. Thank you, Excel. I'll compute it myself. So the highest value in there was 93.9, and the lowest was 88.6. So it's a fairly tight range. What I'm going to do next is standardize that palette. So I'm going to create a palette based on the highest and lowest index overall, not on any particular month. And the reason why I'm going to do that is that way the colors will remain stable if I then start scrolling through months. So I'm going to create a color palette. Is color quantile, and I'm going to use red, yellow, green, and the domain here is going to be the overall So jobs SA4 $index, and let's make it, let's give it a little bit more. So now I've made this palette of 10 breaks across the wage index for the entire country and over all dates that we have. So now I'm going to go back down to my polygons, and rather than having that quantile being created, I'm going to call leaflet pal of index. And now, with any luck, if I run all that, I will get an updated picture of Australia with standardized colors so that the red and green are separated by more. The data here are indexed such that the 14th of March is 100. And we can see from the earlier slide that there was quite the dip in April. And so I picked the 18th of April because this is a part where most of the country is red. And this way, because it's not relative to that exact date, we can see that this was a bad time, if you will, for the whole country, where Outback Queensland is kind of doing the best, but otherwise the whole country's red. If I do the same thing, but with a little bit later on, if I look at a date I have in August, and again I'll be using Shiny for this, but if I look at like the 8th of August and rebuild that, we can see things looking a little better. In terms of data visualization, however, there is a question of, do you want your colors to be relative? Do you want your colors to be red and green based on a certain date, or red and green based on overall, so that you can see when the entire country is down, the country is red, or as here in August, most of the country we see is green, unless we zoom in to Melbourne, which was in the second part of the lockdown. Melbourne is orange and red. Come on. There we go. So at this time, August last year, Melbourne, Tasmania wasn't doing so great. There's some yellow, but like Sydney, Brisbane, the rest of the country has recovered. In some cases with wage indices greater than March that year, but Melbourne was still below in northern Tasmania. So that's what I'm doing in terms of the graphs to try to show how you would take external data by SA4 or by whatever geographic information you want. In this case, it's ABS data by SA4. That's how it comes from the ABS. Join them together so that you get that extra data there, and then generate the graph. So that's what I mean by using R for data visualization. Filling the map in Shiny, what that's going to be is, rather than me prescribing a date, have the date set by Shiny, and then if I have time to animate this map, and all that means is taking the map, probably without the tiles, plotting it for each date, screen capturing that, and then combining all the images into a movie, basically, so that then you can embed that into my slides and go from there. As I'm doing that, let's save this. Let's build those slides to see how it looks for my presentation. If you don't have HTML slides, if you're trying to do all this in PowerPoint, then Leaflet doesn't work as well anymore. There are some other packages, like you can make ggplot plot all the images, but I don't really have experience with that, so I'm going to stick to Leaflet. In general, I'm fighting the uphill battle with most of my clients to try to get everyone away from Word and away from PowerPoint, because these days it's kind of expected that you you can view these on your phone or on your tablet. So I'm hoping that more people will go to HTML-based reports, HTML-based presentations, because if there is a question of, hey, I want to zoom in on Melbourne or Sydney or whatever during each one of these dates, that you can do so above and beyond the modeling. And to that extent, I can see why people are using Shiny in R Markdown for BI, but it's so much more than that. It's the reproducibility, that I know where I got my data. I know how I imported it. I know how I got any individual chart. And to use the interactivity to build models is a big step up in my experience. So it's knitting away, which means I get to drink more tea. Let's promote that back to the top. So that was my basic slide before, with the information added on. It's hopefully a little bit quicker now. Could probably put the date in my label. That might be helpful. When I do this in Shiny, I'll have a text thing at the top saying as of some date. But until then, I'll just look at my little picture of Australia. Boom. So there I have my slide. It's got the name here. If I make this full screen, so again, this is how I'm building slides. I'm not using PowerPoint to do this. I'm doing everything in R, if you will, with dividers like this, with maps. I should probably add a divider up here for the basic plots. Figure out what's going on with that. That'll be a fun exercise for me. Hooray. And now for the satisfying part. Filling the map in Shiny, I will do later, I think. Basically, I'm putting off all the Shiny parts because then I'll be running this interactively, and I think it'll take a little bit longer to render, and I don't really want to wait right now. Reporting with R Markdown and Shiny are the only two things I really have left. So I don't know if I want to animate the map, because the animation package gets a little grumpy with me sometimes. And when it gets grumpy with me, I normally respond by getting grumpy with it. And I don't know if I want to be grumpy right now. Or I can write the general information about how R Markdown works and how Shiny works, just as an overview rather than actually getting into the data. Let's add the overview up here. Overview slide. Interactions with Shiny. Is that still on top? Do I need to move that? I do need to move that. There we go. Sorry about that. Oops. It is my first time streaming, so if you ever see something like that, please just yell at me in the chat. I think I've got the chat open now, but I'm not sure. Alright, so interactions with Shiny. Let's talk about how this works. Shiny's structure. And it's split into component parts, a UI, a server or backend, and global processing, e.g. data. Definition of inputs and outputs, up to you, configurable, customizable, and what else do I want to say about Shiny? Pre-built widgets, such as drop-down menus, numeric inputs, date inputs, which is what I'm going to use for my map, and what else? What else do I want to say about the structure of Shiny? I want to say that many packages have paired output and render functions. So for example, I'm going to be using leaflet output and render leaflet. I think is what they're called. Let's check. Yep. So leaflet output in UI and render leaflet in server. And so what that means is in the UI I'm going to have a leaflet output element, which is going to be driven by a render leaflet. So when I design the UI, I want to say, right, create this panel which is going to contain the output from leaflet. And render leaflet on the server side says, right, this is what you need to draw in order to do that. So I'm going to bite the bullet and go up here and put runtime Shiny. And when I do so, if you watch this knit thing, it's going to change into, come on. When I save it, it's going to change into run presentation. And what that means is rather than compiling a standalone HTML, this document will quote-unquote run because I'm going to have objects, some of those input elements from my UI, to input things such as what data I want to use. I'm going to start with that, so that then when I go through that filter statement in my leaflet, rather than being a fixed date, which here I had hard-coded, instead it's going to have a date date input element, so I can grab the date and use it then. I don't know if I'm going to want a date input element or if I'm going to have a select input to say get a date. I think I'm going to do select input to get a date for now because there's only certain dates and I don't. Is there a round date function? There is a round date function. I don't know if that's going to work though. So what I might do is use a drop down for now and look at making this work another time so that I'm not simply staring at the help function the whole time. Just saying. So with these pieces though, I'm going to create a UI which is going to have two elements. Shiny leaflet. I'm going to have a UI. How does this work? I'm going to cheat and make a new R Markdown with Shiny as a presentation. Okay. And I'm going to see how it's set up. It's set up like this. And I'm going to have my input panel not be a slider input. I just want a select input, which I'm going to call ref date, label select a date, and the choices are going to be the distinct of jobs SA4 date. And I'm not going to render a plot, I'm going to render a leaflet, which is my code from here. But instead of making this, so if you select things in RStudio, then hit Control-I, it indents it for you, which is a very nice time saver if you've never used that before. So now rather than making it date of that thing I input, I'm going to have this be the input of ref date. So now I will hopefully have an input panel that says, right, pick a date from the dates I have available. And rather than using the hard-coded, it will filter by that date to get my new data, and then it will create the leaflet. Now, because I'm using a render leaflet, it should go to this slide. So it's been a while since I've done this. Let's see how we go. Let's run the presentation. It will take a while to run as it recompiles everything, which is why I wanted to wait on doing this. Let's promote that so that you can watch it. You can wait and watch that with me. Ooh, it's big. It's huge. Why are you so big? Let's make you smaller. There we go. Let's have you be about that big. Hey, I disappeared. Let's come back. Hi. Well, no one complained in the chat, so it must not have been that serious. Or there's just no one in the chat. Hard to know. And let's bring back that. So where I am now currently is in that interactive with Shiny. waiting for it to render. I got an error. That'll slow it down. No. Choices didn't like distinct, unique. Fine. Try again. What I should do is comment out all those other code chunks so that I'm not waiting for it to build all the other leaflets. That would be smart, Craig. Why don't you do that? Why don't you do that while you wait for this to render in case it breaks? So what I'm going to do is make sure that you can see what I'm doing before I keep doing this. So I'm gone into my code chunks here, and I'm putting this eval equals false. And all that means is do not evaluate this chunk. And so by turning off all of the chunks, that will hopefully make this run a bit faster. I'll let it keep making the ggplots because I don't really care. But the shiny leaflet is the one I really want to see, and hopefully will work this time. Hopefully. Okay, now it's rendering shiny leaflet. Go. Run. Work. Work. Cross your fingers, everyone. If you don't have your fingers crossed and this breaks, I'm going to blame you. Let's see here. This is where I want. Yep. Okay. Go. Now I know there's a function called leaflet proxy, which basically says this leaflet that you've made, don't worry about the fact you don't have direct access to it. There is a leaflet out there somewhere. And what I want you to do is go out and update that leaflet wherever it is. So I might need to look into that, figure out how that works. Example 18 of 18. Go. It hasn't crashed yet, so that's progress. I hope. But yeah, I think turning off those other Maps will speed this up considerably. As a side note, we had a survey of what people wanted to see before this, and spatial data, location data, was one of the most requested things, so that's why I'm doing maps. Otherwise, I would make my life a lot easier by having much faster things to show. What happened when I did that? Everything went black. That's what happened when I did that. Learning how to use this the streaming software is also a bit bumpy, which is why I disappeared for like half the video. Oopsie. Right, so I'll try again. Hopefully with everything disabled, this will run a bit faster. Yeah, I'd say that's a bit faster. So let's make sure this is still up. Huh. So here I have my new and improved Shiny app, where it's got the option to, can you see this? No, promote. So now I've got this slide where it asks me to select a date. You can see everything's kind of in the 90s. In early 2020, this is the Christmas effect. So after Christmas, everything crashes, and if I go up to a different date, it remerges refilters the data, remerges it with the map information I have, and then redoes the map. This is why I want the leaflet proxy function, which I haven't used in a long time. I want to use it instead of rendering it directly, because now it has to redraw the map again. And so here we are in mid-February 2020, where the country's green. Yay! Things are over 100. If I go to March 14th, this is rather boring, because this is the index day. So as of March 14th, every SA4 was defined to have a wage index of 100. So hopefully the entire country will be the same color, this kind of greenish yellow color, once it updates. And I drink my tea, so there we go. Now the country's all the same color. And if I want to see the impact of events, like the next week, and this is why doing an animation is on the list of things to do, assuming I can get the animation package to behave itself, because I'd like to be able to simply toggle through, go through each date, update the map, show it again, show it again, show it again, and animate it all so that you can see the evolution of color go through the depths of the covert recession, or whatever you want to call it, and then the recovery, with sympathy for those of us in Melbourne who endured a little bit less growth, shall we say. So as that updates, well, that's interesting. What just happened? RStudio got very grumpy with me all of a sudden. That's new. I guess I picked our bad date. Maybe. There's a saying amongst some of us coders, the fastest way to break code is to do a live demo. So even though it worked when I selected another date, apparently when I selected that date, yeah, screw that date. It doesn't like it much at all. So everything locked up, which is exciting. Hello, RStudio. What happens if I move you around? Nothing. Right. Let's close this window. See if that fixes it. Okay, well that slows me down. I'm going to exit RStudio the hard way. Come on, RStudio. What's wrong? And restart. And go to my data viz and go back to here. Good, it's back up. That's very nice. And make sure my eval is false is on. It is. This makes me happy. And run this presentation. And see if the window is still here. It is not. All right, so here we are again. I now have my slides, which are going to be, come on, next. Data wrangling, plot overviews. Remember, I didn't turn these off, but when I go back to my maps, I've turned off the evaluation of the code so that it goes faster, so there's nothing there. Reporting with R Markdown. Shiny, here's my Shiny plot where I pick a date and it updates the map of Australia. So that's after Christmas, and if I go down to somewhere in August and have it redraw the map, I'm a little hesitant to touch it at the moment because last time it crashed my RStudio. But it looks a little bit happier now. Let's promote this back up. So now I have the information here. Oh, I wanted to add the date, didn't I? Yes, I did. Granted, it's at the Let's move that back to the top so you can see the map. So now I've got the date written in my tooltip information. And if I go back to, let's go more recent, let's go to happier times. Let's go to basically a year on from our index point. Remember March 14th, 2020, everything was indexed to be 100 and was this nice uniform green color. So now that I'm a year on, well, almost a year on, March 13th, 2021, it will redraw the map, recolor all the SA4 regions, and be good from there. So there are still some regions that haven't gotten back to full, if you will, to where we were before. But for the most part, the country is looking a lot better than it was back back here, where basically the whole country was red. And so in this way, while I will say that Shiny is more than a BI tool, you can use Shiny as a BI tool. There are ways to make this faster, which I need to look into and get back up to speed with. Things like this leaflet proxy idea, where you don't need to redraw the entire graph every time. Of course, I've added the date and the SA4 name and some words to that tooltip. You can add more things to go that way. It's basically limited by your imagination and what you have the data mapped to. If you have other economic or population data by SA4 that you wanted to merge in to create multiple lines, you can do that, but this is one way to use Shiny to interact with your leaflet map by filtering out the data you want, so that when it joins together and you show the map, it looks like this. So going back to my console here, I'm going to stop running my presentation. Stop. This has killed my slides and moved around all of my windows, which is annoying, but that's why I'm here to learn. So going back to my Word document for the fun part of this, the components, UI server, etc. is done. Differences from R Markdown to Shiny I can write. Differences between R Markdown and Shiny is that R Markdown is pre-computed, and you can have arrays of graphs you can have multiple graphs, tabs, nav bars, etc. But information underlying them is static. So for example, in the R Markdown document, which I'm writing, I have these multiple graphs on multiple slides. When I do the R Markdown part of this, I hope to have some of the other organizations. So having different tabs in your different tabs within a single slide, or a nav bar so that you can have a drop-down menu, so that if I wanted to look at the high point, the low point, the first of each month, for instance, under a drop-down, I can do that with R Markdown. The difference is then that graph is that graph. Whereas with Shiny, allows for inputs and outputs to dynamically change graphs and data, graphs, tables, data, etc. So this, I think, is the big reason why I use Shiny, is that it does allow for dynamic updates of data. So if, when I go back and do the first part of this, the idea of having a time series forecast, but changing your model based on which data points you use to construct the model gives you a different forecast, of course. And so the idea then is, if I make that forecast by extending my jobs SA4 using whatever ARIMA model or forecasting model I want, then when I come down to my Shiny, it's been updated. Whereas with R Markdown, I need to pre-compute everything, and I can have multiple selections. I could enumerate for every date. I could make an R Markdown of these are all the dates, make them all as layers to leaflet, and you just click on each one. But that's different from, and then you go back in time and you say, actually, I want to redefine what points I used to do the time series, which means I get a new time series model, which means I get a new forecast, and now I need to update all of the graphs. So the way I'm using Shiny here isn't like that. It's like a BI tool. You just pick one. And that difference, though, is, in my opinion, what makes Shiny different from just a BI tool. The idea that you can completely dynamically recalculate the data and then display it differently, as opposed to be given a collection of charts and pick one. Not exactly the best use of that here. The better use will be the time series example, which I'm going to do in a little while. First, I'm going to see how long I've promised to be online, because talking for a long time to no one in particular isn't the easiest thing to do. So I said I'd be on for a couple of hours. It's been a couple of hours. I might look into what's going on with this image not working and then call it, if I can make this image work. So I've done a previous talk where I did an introduction to Google Viz, and if I can find that, I included an image there. And so I'm going to find that and lift what I did. Of course, it's been a while since I did that. It might be on my laptop, not my desktop here. That would slow me down. That would be unfortunate. Because I don't think that I use an image and the other stuff I have. Did I use it for Kaggle? So this is a Kaggle, well, this is the beginning of a Kaggle thing I wrote. Yeah, there's no pictures in there. So let's go back here and let's try to find out what's going wrong with this. What if I delete this optional caption to run the presentation. Nope. So if I look at the R Markdown basics and have a or in the same directory, what if I save it as something other than a JPEG? File save as data snapshot. Well, it still needs to be a JPEG. For whatever reason, let's make an images. Let's save it there. And let's turn off my Shiny because I'm not using it. No. Do I need another? I do have the stupid thing, right? It's exclamation mark, caption in square brackets. No, it's backward. That's the problem. I found the problem. I tend to get that backward. Which one is the square bracket? Which one's the curly bracket? Yay! It's way too big though. So what I can do is resize this somehow. Do I know how to resize this? I can resize it in the, no, not the store. I can resize the image itself by editing this in Paint 3D, because why not? No. And you open, come on. That's really interesting. It thinks that this image is actually another image. And I don't know why. There it goes. Let's take this and make it smaller. Oops. I put some random dots in there. Crop. We'll just crop it. Menu. Save as. Image. Data snapshot smaller. And I'll put it in my folder. And I'll make this smaller. And now when I run my presentation, looks like this, or that. And I think that's good enough because it shows the state and territory with the numbers, the statistical area for the numbers, some of the dates as columns with all the numbers underneath it. It's not perfect. It's not, hey, look, it put my logo down there. It's not exactly where I want it, but it works. And I think there's a way to move the logo. Let's see if I can move that logo. I don't know if you saw that. Did you see that? Do I need to run this again to make sure you saw that it works? That doesn't look like that window. Why don't you look like that window? I understand this might be a little funny because actually when I move my mouse around, I'm clicking on things that you can't see, apparently, which is a little odd. I don't know why it's doing that. Anyway, I don't care why it's doing that, and I'm hungry, but suffice it to say, as you can see in my R Markdown here, changing the parentheses makes the image appear now. I don't know if there's anyone in chat. Is there anyone in chat? Hello, people in chat. Hello, people in chat. Are you in chat? I might log off for a while. Does anyone have questions? Oh, thanks. Just out of curiosity, are you able to hear me? I've had a few fights with the streaming thing. It's my first time ever doing this, and it's been an adventure. So that's exciting. Good. I'm glad you hear me. There is about a minute delay between when I speak and because I can watch myself, and so when I like point or do this, which is something I don't normally do, I can see when I do it on the stream. There's a bit of a delay. Are you able to see like my code here? Is it big enough? Because otherwise I might stop, go get some dinner. I'm planning to do this again Tuesday evening, armed fresh with the lessons I learned from this time. I'm going to put this up, the stream. It's on YouTube, so it should go automatically through, I hope. Or I'm going to learn how to make it try to go through. I have a list of slides that I'm making. The ones that I've crossed out are ones that I've done during this stream. and the other ones I'm going to need to spend a bit more time getting it ready so that it's not completely me floundering around. I want it to be a little bit more polished, or at least have the mistakes be problems that I'm having with the streaming software rather than problems that I'm having with R. Cool. I'm going to. Did you find it through the meetup? Because I linked there. I'm going to post there again when I'll do this again, and it'll be in the evening, so maybe that'll be better for people. I don't currently know why I have two RStudio windows in my streaming window, but that's very curious. But if I make that bigger, then I disappear. So if I do this, I should reappear. And if I do this, the logo should come back. Okay. Adventures in streaming software. Oh, cool. I'm glad it popped up to tell you that. Because, yeah, I haven't really tried this. I did post a link in the meetup group that I'm preparing this for, but it's yeah, it's been an adventure. I'm gonna try again, see if anyone's found this through the meetup group where I'm presenting, and if not, then yeah, just trying to go live and do the coding through my channel. I might post it to LinkedIn, see if it works. Again, I'm new to streaming, so I'm still figuring this out, which is very exciting. Promote you. There we go. But yeah, if you're subscribed to the channel, this is a list of things that are in. You should get a notification that the overview is done and is up and running. And otherwise, I will hope to see you on Tuesday. And with that, I'm going to try to end the stream from my streaming software. Goodbye.